Before we launch into our program, I want to just acknowledge recent passing of two of our members. One is Herb Milstead, who I was able to put an article in the newsletter recently. I hope everybody got the newsletter. So we'll miss Herb. He was just a great citizen of Montevallo and a good friend to a lot of people. So sorry about his passing. And then since then, Lori Binion has passed away also. And so I just heard about that not too long ago. And so she was into her 90s and had a long and illustrious career as an illustrator and also a citizen of Montevallo. And she will be greatly missed as well. You know, she was part of the Orr family. She had been on one of our earliest members and had remained active until her death. And so our condolences go out to her husband, Charlie, and they were just great about coming to these meetings and supporting what we're trying to do here. So my good friend Jim Brown here, who I've known forever it seems like, and we were roommates at Auburn for a year, and so I've been pestering him for a long time to put together a show, a presentation about his family's business, Alabama Coach Company. And once he shared with me some wonderful photographs that his father had kept over the years of the business. I knew for sure that we had a solid program, and I hope that you'll be able to appreciate that today. And so before we jump in, I'm going to let Jim say a few words, and then we'll get going.
Okay, Clay did not pester me. I mean, I think he had this idea, 7, 8 years ago? He may have had it longer than that, but he proposed it 7, 8 years ago before COVID. And Clay had a lot of photographs too. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. I know some of you had to travel, and of course, NFL playoffs are starting right now, so we'll try to keep this short and sweet. But I want to thank Clay for the idea and for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to talk about my dad and the bus company. Clay is, I'll tell you, his research, I'm sure you know, it's amazing. It's amazing. I've learned so much about my dad and the business just in the last few weeks I didn't know. Clay, his planning, his organization, he's just so professional. I mean, he's great to work with. So Clay, I want to thank you. So
You're welcome.
Turn it back to you.
And the secret to my success is sitting right here at Kerry Heatherly.
I didn't do it.
I don't think anybody appreciates what he has accomplished with the digital archives at the Carmichael Library more than me. Because just about everything I find out about and share with y'all, either a program like this or a newsletter or a website. So as a result of me finding it in Kerry's well-managed archives. It's just a tremendous resource that we have here that I think many other communities would just be green with envy if they realized what we have and what they don't have. But it's just an endless resource for finding out anything, just about anything you want to know about this community. So thanks again, and I encourage you to support Kerry and the Carmichael Library with your charitable donations because it really goes to a good cause, particularly if you have a strong interest in local history here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start out and give you just a capsule overall history of the Alabama Coach Company, how it got started and what it eventually developed into. After that, Jim's gonna talk a good bit about his dad, just as a character, as being the driving force behind just the idea of having a bus company in Montevallo to begin with. And then we have the slides and other things of interest that I've managed to put together. And I hope that it won't take more than an hour, but we will see. And Jim's gonna be jumping in with anecdotes about his family, about his dad, and some personal stories from his life and his association with the bus company. So, W.L. Brown and his sons Hansel and Wyman started Brown Motor Coaches Company in the early 1930s, transporting Alabama college students to and from the Calera passenger train depot to catch the LNN Railroad's busy north-south trains through central Alabama. They also operated a bus for the school with Alabama College painted on the side and took groups such as the Glee Club to off-campus performances and events. The name of the company was changed to Alabama Coaches Company about the time the Alabama Public Service Commission authorized a franchise for the company to begin operating its first public bus route between Tuscaloosa and Sylacauga in 1935. This is, I think, my favorite photo in the whole mix. Idea of an Alabama College marked bus in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The bus line's base of operations was the large corner lot on the southeast corner of Middle and Valley Streets, where there was a small repair garage and parking for idle vehicles. The Browns leased the property from Dr. P.C. Wilson, druggist and owner of Wilson's Drug Company. Dr. Wilson constructed a building facing Middle Street to serve as a terminal and offices for the company in 1939, next door to the Montevallo Cafe building. That same year, the company was granted permission to operate a route between Montevallo and Birmingham that included Bessemer. Prior to getting the new station, the bus company had a ticket office inside Wilson's drugstore, and passengers boarded the bus on the street. By the mid-1930s, the automobile had become a common sight on city streets and rural dirt roads, but many Alabamians still did not own cars, so the opportunity to travel inexpensively by bus to the smaller communities was a much welcome convenience. As the Alabama Coaches Company buses made their presence known outside their headquarters in Montevallo, business boomed, and they were granted even more routes to cities such as Gadsden and Selma. Group charters became a lucrative source of additional revenue, and during World War II, twice daily buses hauled workers from Montevallo to and from the Ordnance Works in Chillersburg, which the U.S. government had opened there as part of the war effort. The Alabama Coaches Company continued to expand and prosper into the 1940s and was able to build their own brand new state-of-the-art bus terminal on Main Street that included a restaurant, which they moved into in 1946. By 1946, W.L. Brown, who started it all as a taxi cab business in the mid-19 teens, had bequeathed the day-to-day operational responsibilities of the bus line to his sons, Wyman and Hansel Brown, appointing Wyman as president of the company. In addition to starting the bus company, W.L. Brown later served as chairman of the Shelby County Board of Revenue for several terms. His brother was the dynamic and multifaceted Montevallo entrepreneur, J.A. Brown Sr. After their first few years together, beginning in 1913, getting Brown Brothers Lumber Company in Montevallo off the ground, it appears that they never became business partners, each forging their own personal success. Alabama Coaches Company had outgrown their cramped lot on the corner of Middle and Valley Streets, and their good fortune allowed them to build and move that year into a spacious and highly functional new bus station a few blocks away at the corner of Main and North Boundary Streets. But there's no doubt that Wyman Brown was the driving force and spark plug for the rapid expansion and success of Alabama Coaches Company in the 1930s and 1940s. And now, my friend here, Jim Brown, who is Wyman Brown's son, would like to give you a sense of who his father was and the role his dedication to work, family, and personal interests played in the creation of a far-flung and prosperous commercial bus line originating and operating from the unlikely town of Montevallo, Alabama. And that's Mr. Brown.
Okay, my dad was Alabama Coach Company. He actually helped construct the buildings, the depot and the garage. And then, of course, he was the manager and operator of the bus station. I think Clay had told me about an article had been written referring to him as dashing.
Let me clarify. This is in the book. Time has made a change in me that I think probably some of you have copies of. If you don't, you need to get one. It's just the best thing in the world. There's an article in there written by Robert David Ward, who's the editor of the book. He was he was the uncle of who we know as the Rotenberry girls, and in that book, it's basically a collection of stories about growing up in Montevallo. He writes a very entertaining story about traveling with his sister to South Alabama on one of her crazy research projects. And they had to go to Calera and catch the Greyhound bus to go to Southeast Alabama. And he says that, but before they could do anything, they had to catch the bus from Montevallo to Calera, driven by the dashing Wyman Brown.
So he was certainly charismatic. He could be charming, but he was very ambitious, very hardworking, very disciplined. He was also a very loyal person. What I remember a lot about my dad was his sense of humor. He was very funny. He was always telling his stories, jokes. Sometimes the jokes were corny, but they were so corny they were funny. He reminded me a lot of Andy Griffith. I see a lot of Andy Griffith in my dad. And of course, we've all heard, I'm sure we've all heard and even said, Montevallo's like Mayberry. So in the early Mayberry shows, Andy Griffith shows, the buses there are identical to the buses that my dad drove. So there's a big connection here. My dad loved to travel. There's a slide in here where he's in Mexico. Loved to travel, and he was fascinated with geography, landscape, and the history of the places he traveled to. And I was just always kind of envious of where all he went, because he went to so many different places. And the fascinating thing is back then, they were mostly dirt roads. So that's unbelievable to travel all over this country on dirt roads, 2-lane roads. My dad, he loved to ski. That's, this picture here is the one that is one of my favorites, because again, he was a very funny guy, great sense of humor. Loved to ski. This is in Gatlinburg, June of 1960. We would go up there twice a year, in the summer, and then we would go in the winter to ski. And he loved to ski. This is in Gatlinburg, and of course, this is probably maybe 61 or 62. That's me, that's my sister Carol, and my brother Charlie. Of course, that's Gatlinburg. He loved the mountains. He loved Cherokee, North Carolina. And there's an amphitheater there in Cherokee. They used to do a play called Unto These Hills. It was about the Cherokee Indians And so that's what these are. And in Gatlinburg, one time we stayed at the Bearland Motel, and I'll never forget, I guess he could probably see the decline beginning of the business. So he and my mom were talking about him selling the bus station. And by the way, when I say the bus station, that's how he referred to it, and my family. That included both buildings, but it was always the bus station. But he was talking about selling the bus station and buying the Bearland Motel. And as kids, we were ecstatic. We were like, this is great. We can ski all the time, you know. So, but the thing is that he loved driving the bus. He told me many times it was his most favorite thing to do, and that was his passion. And he held on to it. He didn't sell out for the money, so you know he kept Alabama Coach Company. Another thing my dad loved was Auburn football. He loved college football in general, but especially Auburn football. And he introduced me to college football, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But in 1960, when I'm 9 years old, it started the 35-year line. And for 35 years, we either went to the game or, you know, radio was big back then, listened to the game. And I was fascinated about all the Birmingham News and Post-Herald, the articles and pictures. Now, I've always loved to read, so I'm like, okay, now I can read. So it just kind of combined my love of sports and reading.
We're gonna talk about the Cardinals pen.
Oh, yeah, we can go back to that, sure. 1960, my dad used to take a charter of Boy Scouts to Colorado every summer in August, you know, because we didn't start school till after Labor Day back then, which is the way it should be. So, but he was taking Boy Scouts out there, and they were going to be there for 2 weeks. So he would drive them out there, leave them, and then come back and go pick them up 2 weeks later. Well, we took a family vacation. So my mom drove, and it was my mom and her mom, and me and Carol and Charlotte. We followed the bus, and we went through Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Well, and then we took a little vacation. Well, coming back, my dad had to go through St. Louis. So I wanted to come back with him while my family went back earlier. So we went through St. Louis, and I wanted to go to a Cardinals game. So that's what this is, 1960 St. Louis Cardinals. They played at Sportsman Park, played the Phillies that day. It was a lot of fun. I had just started playing baseball maybe a month or two earlier, so it was all, you know, something new to me. So. That was that bus there was the diesel bus, which that was his favorite. That was his last one when he passed away. In fact, when he passed away, the guy came. There were two buses which did not run. This bus, a guy came down from South Carolina. He worked on it. He finally got it running and drove it back to South Carolina. The diesel bus. Okay, this is the Sylacauga Friendship Club, and he used to take them on charters, and he also would take the Sylacauga High School Band a lot of times on Friday night to their away games, also the Childersburg High School Band. But my introduction to college football was when I was 9 years old. He takes the Sylacauga High School Band to Auburn to what was called Band Day, and I'll let Clay talk about that a little bit.
He also took the Montebello High School band to away games, and I think it must have been like about 64, 65. We had a new band director, and he was interested in our band going to Band Day at Auburn. So, that was a great treat for us. It wasn't on this bus, but it was on one of the older ATF buses that he bought. We were so appreciative because they were air conditioned, and, you know, made a big difference. But that was a great thrill for us, and he hauled us down there for that. And then, personally, I was personally fortunate enough, well, I guess you could say fortunate enough, where he took us, the Montebello High School band, to 2 governor's inaugurations. The first one was when George Wallace was inaugurated in the early 60s, made his famous segregation forever speech. And it was 24 degrees that day. It was as high as it ever got. And our instruments froze solid, so we couldn't even play. And then 4 years later, when his wife Lurleen was inaugurated, Mr. Brown took the band to Montgomery to march in that parade as well. So he had a lot of involvement with the Montebello band as well as the Silicon ones.
Band day, they would invite high school bands, they could get in free, and there were usually, what, 25, 30 bands there?
Lots, yeah.
But I'll never forget, the first time I walked into it was Cliff Air Stadium back then. I was blown away. I had never seen a stadium that big. I had never seen so many people at one time. The bands, all the flags, the colors, and what little football I had watched was on a black and white TV. So this was the first time I ever saw a game in color. And I was blown away. I was fascinated, and it really ignited a spark in me, which became a passion, which eventually led to my career. So I associate my dad. Most of the trips I went on with him were to ball games. He always got in, he got in free, and I remember, I guess it was 1961. That year, Alabama was undefeated national champions. But I remember hearing my dad and these other men, all they talked about, the Alabama fans, was some freshman quarterback from Pennsylvania. He was on the freshman team because freshmen couldn't play back then. I thought, this is unusual. They're undefeated, having a great season. They're talking about some freshmen that's not even playing. Well, the next year, 1962, the first game of the year at Legion Field was Alabama, Georgia. And Joe Namath started his first game. Bama won 35-0. He threw like 3 touchdown passes. I remember thinking, yeah, this guy, he's pretty good. But my dad, in the 60s, he would take at least one, a lot of times 2 charters a season, a year, to Legion Field. And that was really neat, too, to go to Legion Field to games. He took a charter to the Senior Bowl in 1962 in Mobile. He took the Bessemer High School band. And 1963, Auburn played Nebraska, Orange Bowl. He took a charter of that game. We drove down. He was good friends with Kyle McClure. So Kyle and
Whose daughter is here today.
And Cheryl and my mom and me, we rode. Kyle was the driver, so Auburn didn't fare too well that day. I remember we left early, and of course no interstates. We left like maybe 6:30, 7 in the morning. It was almost midnight when we got to Miami. Of course, that's when we had the big snow also. One more thing about football, and I'll move on. My dad always got in free to the games, like I said, and so for about 3 years, I was getting in free with him. Well, the 1962 Iron Bowl, I was getting kind of tall, so we're about to go in, and this guy said, well, he's got to have a ticket. And my dad, well, he's my son, you know. He said, well, I'm sorry, he's got to have a ticket. My dad, well, he's been getting it, so he's got to have a ticket. So we go looking for one ticket, okay? Face value was $5 back then. We found one guy had a ticket for sale for $10. My dad went ballistic. $10 for a $5 ticket. I mean, but I'm begging him, so he buys the ticket and we get to go to the game. So This is my dad in his element. Again, this was his passion. This is what he loved to do, was drive the bus.
This is toward the end of his career. Okay, well, what I'm gonna do now is kind of take things sort of chronologically, just to show you some things that back up some of the things that we've already told you about. W.L. Brown was Jim's grandfather. This is an ad he ran in the local newspaper in 1915. And the essence of this bus company started with a taxi service. W.L. got into several different types of business as he aged and developed his career. But he maintained this taxi service for years, no matter what he was into. So that's him right there. This is a wonderful photo here of W.L. and Jim's grandmother, Della. And this is J.A. Brown Sr. Many of us know who J.A. Brown Jr. was. This is the kingpin here, and they were brothers. And I promise you, there will be a program about him someday that will knock your socks off. But I'm not going to talk much about him today. Although this will show you, okay, this is Highway 139 that goes out of Wilton all the way to Selma. And this is here's Barfield here, this is Ashby here, and I know Adele is familiar with this part of the world.
And remember, at that time, the new 139 wasn't there. They had to go in front of Joe Clark and go over the little 2-lane rickety bridge over Mayhem Creek, and he'd drive the bus over that.
This is what I'm trying to do here is show you where they were from. So this is showing you the way things are today, just to give you a sense of, if you wanted to go down there and find out where they were from, this is.
But weren't they from Brownsville on,
I'm sorry?
weren't they from Brownsville on 73?
No, they were from Oakley, right down here. This is what's called Oakley Station Road.
Yeah, I know where Oakley Station is.
Yeah. And this is where the railroad crosses. And this is a church here called Old Union Baptist.
Yeah.
And Jim's great-grandparents are buried in this church cemetery. And so they got their start, there were 4 brothers actually, they got their start running a sawmill in Oakley. And, but then J.A. and W.L. got married about the same time, about 1912, 1913. And I think probably with the other 2 brothers, they moved to Montevallo. And they set up a sawmill in Montevallo after having that experience down in Oakley. So this is a letterhead that, thanks to Kerry, some of the material he's been able to collect. This is a letterhead from a letter from Brown Brothers Lumber Company in Montevallo in 1915. But, as I said before, W.L. was running the taxi cab business almost as soon as he got to Montevallo. So, here in 1917, he's advertising this taxi cab company. This is an interesting one to me. Now he goes into the grocery business, but he's still got the taxi cab business going. There's a lot in this ad that is very informative. I've moved into the new Ellis building on Main Street. Does anybody know what the Ellis building is?
Wasn't it 5 and 9?
No. Well, whatever. Oh, I looked it out, I'm sorry. Anyway, the Ellis building is what most of us know as the Rogan building on the corner of Main and Shelby Street. And I've learned fairly recently that it was constructed for retail on the first floor, and there was a staircase on the left-hand side going upstairs, and it was arranged for like offices for medical doctors, dentists, lawyers, that kind of stuff. So there was a lawyer who apparently was instrumental in getting this building built about 1917, and he had his office there, along with all of there were 3 physicians in town and 1 dentist, and they were all up there, and it's the first use of that building. But even though he's got fresh vegetables Fridays and Saturdays, and fresh bread received Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, he's still running his taxi cab company. Okay? At some point between 1920 and 1930, he closed up his grocery store, or he might have sold it to F.W. Rogan, I'm not sure. But anyway, he vacated that first floor of the building, and Rogan came in, and he was there for years and years and years. Brown decides to open a restaurant down by the train station called the Bidawee. Strange name. Good eats and drinks at W.L. Brown's Bidawee, but he's still got his reliable Brown's taxi service. Taxi service is always going strong.
Well, Clay, that's before the new Highway 25 was built, so would it have been back?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We all know that the brick building that Brown Trading operated out of for years. I had no idea when that building was built. It's possible that J.A. had built that building and let his brother open a restaurant there. I don't know.
Yeah.
What I can say is that he thought that having a restaurant down by the passenger train depot would be a good idea for people coming through, because at one time there were 3 trains coming through Montevallo every day. And so that was the idea. And I found confirmation in the early issues of the Alabamian campus newspaper that the college girls loved to go to the Bidawee for some reason. I don't know what was so great about it. Good eats and drinks, I guess. Okay, so fast forward to 1935, there's a proposed bus line that the Browns, W.L. Brown and Wyman and his brother Ansel, proposed to the Public Service Commission. And this article says the promoters of this operation are experienced in the transportation business, having operated the Alabama College bus line from Montevallo to Calera for the past 13 years. So they were not Johnny-come-latelys when it comes to wanting to set up a bus company. The very same year, they were awarded franchise by the Public Service Commission to start up a line from Tuscaloosa to Sylacauga. So suddenly they had to deliver. Now, get yourself oriented. This is looking at Fallon Hall from the rear. This is the parking lot in the back of the building. This is a big vacant lot owned by P.C. Wilson from the Wilson Drug Company. And this area in here was where they parked the idle buses. They have a repair shop right here. And they leased this property from P.C. Wilson. And this house is still there. So if you went or it was there before, and it's still there. This shows you now. You had to go to Wilson's Drugstore to buy a ticket, and they were publishing this timetable in the newspaper every week in 1936. This was the year after they were awarded the franchise. Okay, here's the Wilson Drug Company building as it looks today. This is where Cheryl's father had his first drugstore here later on. But the ticket office was through this door here. The door's still there. And when I was in high school, I worked in this building, in this drugstore for a couple of years. We never opened that door at all. I think it's been closed ever since Doc Wilson decided he had enough of selling bus tickets. So he decides to build a new station down the street, down where they were parking the buses and everything. So by 1939, he built just a wood frame building down there to use as a ticket office, waiting room, and a place where people could get on the bus off the street. And this gives you an idea where we're talking about. The building right here was right here. It was torn down, I think, sometime in maybe the late 60s, early 70s, but I can remember it being there. It was just a very simple wood frame building. So you did have to go up here to get your bus ticket. Now it was down here, and the bus could come in here, and people could board the bus here. A gas station came in here just a few years after this building was built. So by 1945, they had essentially outgrown the new bus station that had been built in 1939. So Wyman Brown in 45 announced that they were going to be building a new bus station at the corner of Main and North Boundary Streets, and that's the one that most of us are familiar with, that where the Main Street Tavern is today. This is Jimmy's grandparents' house. This is the corner of Valley Street and North Boundary. If you were standing on the front steps looking out, you'd be facing the Center for the Arts. So that's where this is. And so Jimmy's going to talk about his grandparents just a bit now.
Yeah, and you think this house was built in the 20s, maybe?
I'm thinking before that.
Okay.
Actually, I did have a picture from a 1915 photo album that I think this house is in, so it was probably built before that even.
Yeah, this was a really neat old house. We would go there when I was a kid. This room here is screened in. I used to sit out there many, many hours reading, opening up baseball cards, and that was a really neat balcony there. It was a great place to play for a little kid. So this is my grandmother. We call her Granny Brown, and that's me. I'm about 5. That's my brother Charlie, who he looks like he's a little bewildered there. You know what he's looking at, but and she, my grandmother, she was a great cook, because when I was in school, elementary school, I would walk down for lunch. You know, that's back when you could go to your teacher and say, "I'm going home for lunch. I'm going to my grandmother's for lunch." Okay, we'll see you. So, but yeah, she was a great cook, and I really loved
Jimmy,
that old house.
Do you remember what year she turned some of it into apartments?
No, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It eventually became 4 apartments,
Yeah.
and she lived. Go back one, Clay. She lived this first one down here, and her daughter, Ms. Ambrose. I think she lived upstairs above her.
She lived on this side right there.
But there were 4 apartments there. But that was just a really, really neat house.
One of my jobs in the drugstore was to deliver prescriptions to Ms. Ambrose's husband. And this would have been 65, 66, so it was already divided into apartments by then. And this is a view from the rear. Now, you want to explain its condition?
All I'll say about this, I know exactly when that happened. That was in 1983. And it was also, believe it or not, it was the day of the Iron Bowl. I was at the Iron Bowl. It was when Bo Jackson was a sophomore, and he had 2 long runs. It got really dark. It rained hard at Legion Field. In fact, there was a tornado warning for Legion Field in the 4th quarter, but I don't think one person left. I had this in the 4th quarter. The Iron Bowl was a close game. So, but there was a guy living downstairs. He was the only person in the house. He was in the front of the house when the tree fell on the house. He was so scared, he ran out the front door. He ran a block down to where Ms. Warnicki used to live, took a left, ran another block past the post office. There used to be a little small bar just past Zane's where Zane's Men's Shop used to be. Spending 2 blocks of that bar, he said it scared him so bad. It was so loud.
Part of the reason we wanted to show this was the new bus station was on the property behind this house all the way to Main Street. So, we're not sure if WL already owned that property at the time the decision was made to build a bus station there, but somehow, Alabama Coast Company was able to acquire that land, and that's where the garage was built, and then the depot was right on Main Street. So by 1946, it had been constructed. In the newspaper, they announced that they were about to hold an opening of the bus station. And this is looking at the bus depot from the garage.
Okay, when I was about 3, we moved into the depot upstairs. I guess by that time, obviously, we were living there. The business was starting to slow down a little bit. But when I don't know how long we lived there, maybe a year, but I was 3, 4 years old. Right here was a very small room. That was my bedroom. And I was always fascinated, and still am, that there was no corner over here, which I thought was very unusual. Another neat thing about the building was there were just windows everywhere, upstairs, downstairs, and of course upstairs you could see up and down Main Street, you could see Moore Park, you could see the college, a really neat building. These windows here, they had really strong springs, and what I would do, one time Oscar Blackman was one of my dad's drivers. He was always chewing Wrigley's Juicy Fruit gum. And so one time he gave me a piece, so from that point on, I would open, it was either this one or this one, I would open the window and looking for him to pull in, and as soon as I saw him pull up and park, I would lean out the window and I would holler, "Chew gum, Oscar, chew gum." He would always give me a piece. But also, the same window had a really strong spring, and one day I was just playing with it, and it slammed shut, and it almost cut off the tip of my right pinky finger. They had to rush me up to the hospital in Alabaster. I remember going through Siluria. Fortunately, they saved the tip of my pinky. But really neat building. This corner, back corner here was like an office bedroom, and then it had a little hallway and a walk-in closet to go to the front. The front corner was a shower and bathroom, and then beside, on the front, beside that, there was a men's and women's restaurant.
I used to live there, Mom and Daddy, and I lived upstairs.
Oh yeah?
When Daddy had his Goodyear store in Montevallo, do you remember how gorgeous the floors?
Oh yeah.
They were the most beautiful
Yep.
finished floors I've ever seen. But I remember that.
Now, where did you live exactly?
We just lived in that apartment upstairs. All
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
Probably after y'all lived there.
Because the front side where there was, there were restaurants, there was Smitherman's Pharmacy. That was a big room.
Yeah.
It was originally a banquet room. Had a dummy waiter there. This room was also a large room here, and on this end there was a little hallway going from my bedroom to the front corner. That was the kitchen, but right there between this room and the front of it, there was a little hallway with a pull-down ladder. And the only way you could get inside from the outside, there was only one door on the corner, but down here there was a pull-down ladder which you could walk. If you were downstairs, you could go upstairs. So, but it was a really, really neat building.
It seems like we entered it was just one door, and then you walked inside that, and you went upstairs.
Right.
On that side.
Steep steps.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I remember that.
That was the only
We'll,
one.
we'll come to some other pictures where you can see.
When did the pool hall go in the downstairs?
What's that?
When did the pool tables go in? The
I have no
downstairs?
idea. There were so many businesses in there. The first I remember, we called it Norris's Cafe.
Yeah.
But there were so many, all over the building, that, you know, I don't know.
But we have some evidence of what it went in there, so let's move ahead and we'll see what that says. Okay, this is a view of the garage from the depot looking back. See where-
Well, again, this bay would hold two buses, and over here, there'll be some more pictures we'll show. That's where the pit was, and so we had 5 buses in the garage, and there was actually enough room back in the back where the bar is today at Main Street Tavern. He could have put a 6 bus facing North Boundary Street. There was that much room, but there were actually 5 buses in the building.
At the same time that the depot opened, W.L. Brown, with his experience running a restaurant at the Bodyweed, opened the Townhouse Restaurant. And I'm not sure how long it operated for, but I would say probably at least 10 years. And the thing I remember about it, it had a spectacular neon sign over the front, right there on Main Street. It's pretty neat. This just shows you, by 1947, 1948, they had really expanded their network of routes. This is something I put together just to clarify that. You can see that these are the daily bus routes and stops. The most extensive service area achieved by 1948, a total of 339 miles that they were covering every day. And so you can see that when Montevallo to Tuscaloosa and every pig trail stop along the way, Montevallo to Selma, Montevallo to Bessemer and Birmingham, Montevallo to Sylacauga, Montevallo to Gadsden. These are photographs of tickets that the Main Street Tavern has on display near their front door, just to show you where you could buy a bus ticket to. You could buy a ticket to 6 Mile, Alabama. You could buy a ticket to Pea Ridge, Alabama. You could even buy a ticket to Sawmill Town, Alabama. You know where that is? It's this route right here on County Road 10 that leads out of Montevallo, going by Reynolds Hall and out by the College Lake. But they had stops all the way down County Road 10, including Marvel, Boothton. Sawmill Town is right there. Sawmill Town is between Boothton and Pea Ridge. And then it would come back down to here, and the road would then take you down to 6 Mile and Centerville. And in the beginning, this was a dirt road. It was not paved until just about 1940, I think. But this just shows you how ambitious they were and what they were able to achieve. They were going all the way to Gadsden. But society changed very quickly after 1948. Roads improved, more people could afford cars, and so this type of travel, we're just assuming, just became economically unfeasible for Alabama Coach. And they started sort of circling wagons and focusing just on routes that were still lucrative. Now, the Montevallo to Birmingham continued to operate for a number of years, but then he shifted primarily into charters in addition to that. This schedule board is on the wall at Montevallo, or the Main Street Tavern. I'm sure you've all seen that, but just, they would fill it in with chalk every day just to show where they were going and what times they were departing and arriving. So, this is one of their workforce buses here. It was made by the Beck Bus Company. And they pretty much settled on, in the early days, on the smaller buses because of the road conditions, for one thing, that they could handle the roads. But they only needed buses with a capacity of about 25, 30 people. And so, these were specialized buses made by niche bus manufacturing companies. And Alabama Coach had 3 or 4 of these over the years. And this shows, this is Wyman right there. We think this is his brother Ansel here. And this is one of their later buses. It was a slightly bigger one than what I just showed. Now, when they were really riding high in 1946, they bought 2 brand new Fitzjohn Duraliners. And these were top of the line, state-of-the-art buses. They were not air conditioned, but they were really great. And this is Wyman. He had traveled all the way to Muskegon, Michigan to pick up these buses and drive them back to Montevallo. And so once they had these in their fleet, they were in constant use. This is still serving the college students at Alabama College for any need they have. This is one of the Fitzjohns here that they're boarding, getting ready to go. Your guess is as good as mine. They're sure dressed, ready to go. These are the 2 Fitzjohns here, but by now he's acquiring larger buses so he can take larger groups on charters. And what he would do is he would buy a used bus that Greyhound had discontinued. This particular one was called the Silver Sides, and it was the mainstay of the Greyhound fleet for years and years and years. And but he had one of those. You can tell that he was kind of a bus nut because he wanted to make sure he had at least one of every cool bus he could come across. This is my 3rd grade elementary school class. This is back in the days when we would have combined classes. So I was in a combined 3rd and 4th grade class, and then there was another of just pure 3rd graders. So for a trip to Tuscaloosa to the Natural History Museum and then down to Moundville the same day, our teachers combined both of these classes, chartered it, an Alabama Coach Company bus. We all had to bring our lunch. You can see, here's Paul Allen holding their lunch there. And it was a very memorable trip, and first time I'd ever been on a bus. My mother shot this photo for the newspaper. This is the Silver Sides bus as it would have looked when Greyhound was using it. This is another trip in the 4th grade. Some of you may remember Miss Hamrick, her class. We went to Sylacauga to the marble quarries. And so he took us on the Silver Sides here, and every one of us got a marble paperweight at the marble quarry. I still have mine, by the way. So that's what they're showing. The kids are showing their marble paperweights that they're getting. He said this was 1959. Now, as I said, the Birmingham to Montevallo route continued to operate, but the number of riders and passengers continued to shrink and shrink and shrink. And it turned out that some days he would have enough passengers to use one of the larger buses. Then some days he had only 2 or 3 people, and no point in taking a big bus out for that. So he bought a VW bus with 2 bench seats in the back here. And there were a few commuters, and Adele, I don't know if your dad was one of them that would take this bus, but mine had to go up.
Dad drove and took riders.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah.
But my dad would take the VW some Monday mornings to go to Birmingham. And then you could see them running this every weekday, really well through the 1960s.
We're really on it up into the 70s,
Really?
because a couple of times I had to drive the route for my dad to Birmingham and back twice. I did that a couple of times, early 70s.
Do y'all remember, did he go up and drop people off and come back, or did he stay?
Now, he would come back.
I thought so.
He would go, come back, and go, and come back again. He always went through Helena, so.
His bus was not red. Okay, we were talking about businesses that went into the depot. This is an announcement that was in the newspaper saying that it's open again. This is Ms. Norris, who operated the Co-Ed Cafe. She lived across the street. There's a florist shop really right down here on Island Street. Ms. Norris's house is still there, next door to that flower shop. And but this is an ad from 1962. And as I recall, you didn't see many co-eds in the Co-Ed Cafe. It was kind of a greasy spoon kind of thing. And but that was one of the businesses that moved in there after the townhouse closed up. This is what is called an ATF Brill bus. This is the one that he was hauling bands in. This is the one that he got from Greyhound, and it was the air-conditioned bus. And what we think he had, 3 or 4 of these, something like that. So he could, like with our band, he would usually haul us in 2 of these buses, and we would fill them up. But these became real workhorses for his charter business. This was in the 1960s, primarily. This is the band, our band. See, there's 2 of them. There's one back there and one here. We had just gone to Tuscaloosa for state competition in 1965. We got a superior rating, so we were over the moon about that.
These are the buses you see on the Andy Griffith Show a lot. And also in the 60s, about this time, every year in October, it was great the way it fell. October, the teachers would have to go to Columbiana for meetings, so we call it half day. We would get out at 12 o'clock. Well, it was the same time as the state fair in Bessemer. So I would, 12 o'clock, I'd walk down to the bus station, hang out for an hour. I think we left about 1 o'clock, and we would get up there. We would stay till after dark, and that was it. That was so much fun, I'll tell you.
When your dad was an expert penny pinning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was about to skip. I'm glad you remembered that. My dad, he used to always win at the fair, and there was one that they had these big, tall teddy bears with plates on top of their head. You would throw dimes into the plate. I don't know how many dimes had to stay in the plate. It was hard. They would bounce off. He was really good at it. Every year he would win. So one year I said, "Dad, you're so good. Why are you so good at this?" He said, "Come on, let's go upstairs. I want to show you something." So we go upstairs in the depot, and the back corner room. He had a plate in the middle of the room. I don't think he had a stuffed bear. I'm not sure what the plate was on. But he would practice for weeks, throwing dimes into the plate. He was really good at it. I was amazed. A couple other things while I'm thinking about it. I was always amazed, even in the 60s, 70s, how he could maneuver a bus, make turns, back up. And I can't imagine on dirt roads. And he told me the first large bus he ever bought, probably in the 30s, he went down to Tuscaloosa, had never driven a bus that big. He's driving back from Tuscaloosa on a dirt road. He said he was just all over the road, almost ran in a ditch, So later on, he would drive on the right really close to the shoulder, even in cars, and I'd say, Dad, you gotta run off the road here, you're so close to the shoulder. He said, well, I'd rather run off in a ditch and run into a car head on. I said, well, that makes a lot of sense, you know. I asked him one time, what kind of gas mileage you got on one of these buses. He said 6 to 8 miles a gallon. So he would not be happy with gas prices today. He used to always say, when it gets dark, get off the road, because you cannot see at night. Don't drive at night. And even when we would take family vacations, we would check into a hotel like at 4 o'clock, and even in the summer. And we'd go get some dinner and go back to the hotel, watch TV for a little. We were going to get up really early and leave, but yeah, he said get off the road when it gets dark. And then one more thing while I'm thinking about it, sometime back in the 60s, one time he was talking to Dr. Hubbard, and Dr. Hubbard said, you know, if I could give you just one piece of medical advice, it would be drink as much water as you can. And my dad, he occasionally drank sweet tea or a Coke, but he drank water all the time. And I got to thinking, all his traveling, a lot of times he would go off for a week, 10 days, he's eating out 3 times a day. He probably saved a lot of money drinking water. Although, there was one time we were on a family vacation and they charged him 10 cents for a glass of water. Again, it went ballistic. But we got over it, so anyway.
We were talking about Kyle McClure. By 1967, Co-Ed Cafe was history, and Kyle decided to come back into the drugstore business. He did have the McClure drugs down the street. And so this is a very small space for a drugstore, but he managed to shoehorn all of his normal drugstore products into this little space, but then he had his pharmacy in the back too. And the thing I remember about this was that it's hard to imagine this now. He had the first drive-through anything I ever saw in this little pharmacy. You know that curb side you're talking about, you could drive your car right up there and get a window where he would serve you there. Later on, Larry and Donna Smitherman, who many of you will remember, I guess Cheryl could probably explain this, but I guess Kyle decided he'd had enough and wanted to sell the business. So the Smithermans came in and bought him out. And this was their first location. It was in the bus depot. I think before they were done, they had moved down the street to the old building there where the Pizza Hut is today on Main Street. And then they eventually ended up where they are now in the old Ben Franklin building. And this is how the garage looked in 1973. It's just, there's still a few buses hiding. Yeah, I'm just saying that there's still buses being stored there, but it was not being used very much.
Yeah, I was just going to remark about how heavy these doors were. I mean, he had there were chains on a pulley to raise and lower the doors. Chains were so heavy, so thick. And I didn't really know about it until I started, when my dad passed away, I was having to raise them and lower them. Those doors were very, very heavy.
And this is Wyman at the end of his life. This is his marker in Montvale City Cemetery showing he passed away in 1996. Now, this is the way the depot looked at the end of its life. You can see it had really declined from disuse. And the garage building was still in pretty good shape there, but you can see the relationship between the two buildings. And there's the door that Ian was talking about right there. You can take to go upstairs. And, this is when Jim had sold the whole bus station complex to a guy who wanted to put in a restaurant, and they were starting the big demolition. You probably want to talk about that whole experience of cleaning that thing out.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, and I was telling Clay, the thought of taking pictures that never even entered my mind, because when I went in there, I was just overwhelmed. There was a bus here which did not run, a bus here which did not run, and of course the diesel was over the pit. A story about the pit, Clay, is there a bus that, the buses, the wheels are a good bit behind the front of the bus. If you've ever noticed the driver in the front of the bus, you're way out in front of the wheels. And so when I was little, and my dad was gonna park over the pit, and he had these huge cross ties in the front. And he would straddle the pit, he would be easing down real slow, real slow. And I'd be up in the front, standing beside him. And of course, before you get to the cross ties, I mean, you're way past the size of the pit. And every time I would think we were gonna run off in the pit, because we're way out and looking down like, wow, there's nothing there. I said, Dad, we're gonna run into the pit, you know? He said, no, we're fine, we're fine. So it was pretty scary. But there was everything you could imagine in there. My dad was the epitome of a pack rat. Of course, he grew up during the Depression, didn't throw anything away. But I'm not exaggerating. It was pretty much, these two bays here, there was stuff wall to wall, floor to ceiling. You could come in this door here, there was a little path coming over to the second bay, a little path back there, and that was it. And there was stuff on top of the buses, inside the buses, and because he didn't throw anything away, it took about maybe 7 years before I could really see what was in there. Because I had a large dumpster. I don't know how many times I filled that up, throwing trash away. Eventually, when the tree fell on the house, he had moved everything from the two-story house, which was a lot of stuff, to the garage and the depot. So finally, I got to a point I moved it all out to the garage where I could kind of organize it. But it was a job. It was anything you could think of was in there. In fact, over here against this wall, there were two kitchen sinks. Okay, so it had everything you could imagine. But it was there was stuff that I didn't even know what it was, but it was amazing.
This is an article I found in the Shelby County Reporter from 2012. Catherine Legg wrote, announcing that the Alabama Coach Company bus station is coming down. And once they were done with the renovation, this is the first restaurant that was in the garage, but then the depot was not long for this world. So this is the demolition that happened there in 2012. Showed you later in the demolition. And so it's a couple of sad photos, but all was not lost. Fortunately, the city and the Montvale Community Development.
MDC.
Anyway, they got involved with this along with the facelift of North Boundary, the construction of the girls softball stadium, all that. So they got involved with it and ended up with attracting the Main Street Tavern into the garage, putting in a small city park, installing the handsome clock that we're all familiar with. This is the ribbon cutting when the was being inaugurated as the Bicentennial Park as part of the celebration of 2017. And so, there's the sign that marks the occasion, and it's still there today. And so, that's the end result. So we have this very handsome, very beautiful miniature park where the old depot used to be. And I think, Jim, you said you think your dad would be proud.
And you had one more picture, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, I'm amazed that the garage, what's now Main Street Tavern, that building's 80 years old. It was built in 1945. Inside now, it looks pretty much like it did when it was built, which is unreal. You walk inside, the floors are a little bit cleaner than they were back then, but the food's awesome. I just want to thank the Websters, the owners now. I want to thank, the city and the college for preserving the building, and the present owners, Jeff and his brother Jimmy Webster, and their mom Debbie. They run the rest of the food is excellent there. So my dad would be very happy, very proud of the park and the garage, the bus station. So
That's all we have. Does anybody have any questions for
Well, the
anybody?
picture you had of the girls from the college
Yeah.
with their white gloves and their high heels. I grew up hearing my mother and Miss Dean and Miss Guston talk about when they had a day off from school. That was the dress code if you were going to Birmingham, and they would save up for weeks so they could eat somewhere in Birmingham, and they either ate at Woolworth's counter or they ate at Joy. When they really had saved long enough, they could eat and go have an egg roll and a pot of hot tea at the Joy Young's restaurant. But that was the dress code to get on the bus, was what you saw there. They had to have gloves, they had to have high heels, and they had to have a dress.
Sort of a different world now.
A different world.
Yes.
I have a question. You may not know the answer to this. I'm just curious, back in the 40s, when it was all getting started, it was a public transportation, and were black passengers allowed? Was there any black passengers that
I
rode
do
the
not
bus
think
to
so.
Birmingham or wherever?
Not on these buses. I
Or
wouldn't
was
say.
it
they
about-
were in the 70s, because I had to drive the little Volkswagen bus, early 70s. But I do not remember. I know he had some charters, I think in the maybe late 60s, early 70s. But I don't know about back then.
I did take a Greyhound bus from Montgomery to Calera probably in about 1962. And all races were on that bus, and African Americans were not relegated to the back. They could sit anywhere. So that was as early as 62, a Greyhound anyway.
Your state, probably. But I was just curious about.
Yeah, that was the society then.
But there was a black waiting room that was separate from the white waiting room.
They have waiting rooms that make sense.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you remember when Ann Bearden had her beauty shop in the little back corner that, I forget, was that the black waiting room back there?
Yeah.
I think that she ended up putting her beauty shop.
Anybody else?